So there's been a lot of talk, obviously, the past couple of days. I took your calls on this yesterday. There are a lot of very angry people out there with respect to the OQLF's decision, or maybe it was the government's decision. There seems to be some confusion. But sending inspectors, or call them what you will, staff to Montreal area hospitals, including in operating rooms as well, to carry through directives issued by the government, or again, the OQLF, about maintaining services there in French. Now, there is an op-ed in today's Gazette, an opinion piece, and the headline says, Healthcare Language Directive is immoral and dangerous. Eric Maldoff is a co-author, along with Julius Gray, of that article, and he is on the phone. Eric, thanks for being here.
It's good to be with you, and welcome back.
Yeah, thank you. I think back to when Bill 96, so we're talking a couple of years ago, we have talked about this, about whether health and social services would be part of the bill. I will tell you just off the top, my biggest kind of concern here, or confusion perhaps, is the fact that we were told from the get-go that healthcare and social services would be exempt from the language provisions of Bill 96. Is that true, or am I dreaming?
Well, we kept asking for that, but when things really got hot before the adoption, Bill 96 was adopted, on May 24th, 2022, Premier Levesque felt enough heat that he launched an advertising campaign in English daily newspapers in Quebec, Ontario, and other provinces to reassure people, everybody, that Bill 96 was just fine. And I'm literally reading this to you. Several falsehoods have been circulated on the legislation's impact on the English-speaking communities. Here are the facts. Point one, English-speaking citizens will continue to have access in the same way to health and social services in their language. And that is patently false.
So I guess the question, and I asked this yesterday, we had that clip, we played this a couple of times, it might be worth for people hearing this again. So this goes back 2 years ago. Here he is saying exactly what you just said. This is the Premier Legault.
I want to be very clear. There's no change at all in the actual situation of services given to Anglophones and immigrants in English in our healthcare system.
Okay, so what are we supposed to make of that? Because Jean-François Robert, the language minister, basically said exactly the same thing the other day, only to have a senior staffer in his department say exactly the opposite, which is that, yes, there are new directives, and we've seen some of those. They were published last week. I'm not sure what's going on here. Is the Premier lying? Is he just uninformed, misinformed? What's going on as far as you're concerned?
Well, one can only speculate what's going on in their minds when they say these things. Either they believe it and they are radically misinformed and don't understand their own laws and maybe have not read them, or they are trying to put part of the population of Quebec to sleep while the other half is treated as if they're a bunch of lunatics, that being us, who have set our hair on fire over nothing. But one thing is for sure, the law has changed things dramatically, and nothing has been done or said to dispel any of the concerns that have arisen. As a matter of fact, they've been reinforced by the actual language in the law and the language in the directive that they issued within the last 2 weeks.
So I'm going to get, Eric, you've had a chance to see those directives. Have you seen some of the stuff in there?
I've read them all.
Okay. Can you give our listeners just an idea? Because it's one thing to talk about the directive generally, but specifically point an example out of what's in this directive with respect to the services that would need to be provided, if they would need to be provided in English.
Okay. To begin, the situation before this bill got adopted, the amendments to the Charter of the French language, was that English-speaking persons, which were defined for purposes of the law as being anybody who preferred or felt more comfortable receiving their services in English, was entitled to receive them in that language. And the institutions in the network were obligated to organize their services to be able to do that. Didn't mean everybody had to be bilingual. It just meant that management had to organize themselves accordingly. That provision remains in Bill 96, or Bill 101 is amended. What has changed is that they have adopted this, they've legislated the exemplary use of French for the public sector, which is the unilingual or the exclusive use of the French language in all services. Then they say, but there may be some exceptions. And then they said further, one of the exceptions is if health, natural justice, or public safety require. Then the directive says, yes, and what require means is that it has to be some sort of emergency or urgent situation. So it's not just the fact that somebody doesn't necessarily understand or more comfortable or is in a state of crisis. No, it has to be an urgent situation. They also create some other or reflect on examples of other situations where you might be able to use it. If somebody flagrantly can't understand and give a consent, or that their knowledge of the French language is insufficient to understand what treatment they're receiving, or those kinds of things. But all it says in the directive is if those situations arise, the provider of services may use another language, not should, not must. So what's changed dramatically is that the language of service, which should be in the power of the patient who expresses what they need in terms of communication for such services, has been flipped over, and now it's the government that's dictating the service that can be provided. And the exceptions, even where there's an exception, what they point out about and repeat over and over again in the directive, even if there's an exception, you should attempt in any event to use French exclusively. And if you use another language, you can't use it systematically. So the message throughout is don't use it. And there are consequences to using it, unfortunately, which are you can be anonymously denounced for having spoken another language. I'm talking about the provider of the service, who should actually have an obligation to treat people in the best way they can in the interest of the patient, has to start to worry about, is somebody looking at over my shoulder? Does this exception actually apply? Will I be able to defend myself if I'm asked about it or challenged on it, et cetera, et cetera? And when you run into that, it's about the last thing anybody needs when they need health and social services.
It also seems to me, Eric, as you describe this, it puts the onus on that person working in the facility, whether it's a hospital or a residence, and them choosing whether they're going to, I'm going to use the word take this seriously or not, or feel pressured to do this or not based on the directive. And I guess that's unfair as well. As you said, they're supposed to be providing service, not worried about getting caught speaking a language other than French.
Precisely. I mean, in other jurisdictions, the rules are very clear, and people understand this. It's a matter of health ethics, if nothing else, that the providers are to try, if somebody is speaking another language, the providers are to try to accommodate to that. Because their job is to understand what's happening and making sure that the patient, and when I say patient, I want everybody to understand, we're not just talking about hospitals and doctors. We're talking about hospitals, we're talking about long-term care centers, we're talking about rehabilitation centers, we're talking about all of the services rendered within a hospital or any of those centers. So you can imagine it in an old people's home, or no, say the home for the aged.
Seniors, yeah.
Somebody who is in no shape at all to be contending with this kind of a question. And the providers, by the way, under the amended language legislation, the providers are entitled to say, I have a right to work in French, and that's it, that's all. And that cannot be challenged. They've made that right an amendment to the human rights, the Charter of Rights of the province of Quebec. So the right to work in French is a human right, trumps all other rights, including security of the person, quality of service to patients, etc.
I'm going to run out of time. I will ask you, though, because one of the things I pointed out was the language minister, Jean-François Roberge, when asked about this, at some point said, First of all, that no, it doesn't change anything, the same line that the Premier used, but then said he would reach out to the Anglo community to, I don't know what, calm us, reassure us, clarify. It hasn't happened. Will that make any difference to you?
Look, unless they are prepared to come to the table acknowledging that there's a problem with what they've done, this will be a public relations exercise to be able to say, well, we met, we spoke, we explained, and they just don't want to understand, or something like that. Mm-hmm. And I think, to be perfectly frank with you, and it's probably an error to do so, we don't want to get caught in the kind of situation McGill and Concordia ran into, where they end up meeting the Premier over absolutely draconian and unjustified hits on those institutions in terms of foreign students and budget. And they walk out after the meeting, and the Premier then goes on and ignores everything they said and imposes all the measures.
Okay.
So people should think twice before they go to these meetings and not end up used as pawns in a game.
Eric Maldoff, again, worth reading that editorial today, that opinion piece written along with Julius Gray, the constitutional lawyer, about these directives, if you will, and what's going to happen with their implementation. Eric, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
And thank you for inviting me.
You bet.
Welcome home.